Should we jump into our main topic?
Yeah, sure. Let's jump into our main topic.
You wanna go to a magic therapy session?
I think my magic therapy session was imagining Zayatora shaking her underlings out of their lunch money. But yeah, sure. That makes me feel that is therapy of some sort. I feel tremendously better about everything in my life.
What are we talking about today? Well, so the idea is, I don't know, self-reflection is good. I think that's the core of it.
Yup.
We had a conversation like a week ago where I don't remember exactly how it came on, but it resulted in me talking about how I do a lot of self-reflection about playing Magic the Gathering.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I play Magic the Gathering? What do I enjoy about playing Magic the Gathering? What kind of things do I enjoy doing in Magic the Gathering? And your response is, I don't think about that at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it stemmed from a conversation that we were having where you had asked me, and I don't remember if this was for like a prompt or I think this was a self-reflection question. I think this is how it came up, is that you asked me for the purposes of self-reflection, like what I would say you were good at as like a Magic player.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was...
I think okay, look, remember I've had like an entire conversation, convention. Wow, I've had an entire convention between now and then. I've gotten maybe like 20 hours sleep tops in the past like 5 days. But yeah, I think that's about where it came from.
Okay, we'll say it was. So that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah.
Because
guided self-reflect, I think we were planning on talking a little bit about your self-reflection in Magic, and then maybe do some guided Magic therapy self-reflection. Because I admit, like, that's not something that I usually think all that actively about. I think it kind of just also stemmed from me asking, or like kind of like pitching, kind of maybe venting some frustration to you over like, I have all these cool deck ideas and I maybe get halfway through brewing some of them, and most of them just turn out to not actually be like stuff that I end up enthusiastic about. And I think that's fine. I think that we're all going to have some scraps that, you know, end up just going in the waste paper basket at the end of the day. But I think it made me realize that I don't really know what I like in Magic. Like, I don't necessarily have a solid grasp of, like, what differentiates a deck that I enjoy playing and a deck that I, you know, will keep together and actually maybe even build. Like, what hooks me about a deck versus maybe a deck that I don't play as much, or a deck that I kind of brew but then never really have a strong foundation to build.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That's a good description.
And especially because I'm looking at some of my decks right now, just going like, like I'm in the process of building a few new decks. Like, do I need this one to stay around? Like, can we free up some sleeves, free up some staples?
I think, this, goodness, what's the word that I want? This habit, there we go. This habit started a few years ago when I was still regularly going to a local game store, and I had taken apart a Corvold deck recently because the deck, I mean, it was Corvold, so the deck was good if it had Corvold on the battlefield, because Corvold's a very powerful Magic the Gathering card. But the deck was too good for the local scene. When I played it, I was in the position where I would either win or I would get hated out of the game, and I didn't enjoy that experience. I had a similar issue with my very first Commander deck, which was Narset Enlightened Master,
Is that the Narset? Like, I mean, there's a lot of Narsets, but let's be honest. There's kind of one Narset that we
Right.
yeah, okay, yeah. So this is like the Time Walk Narset.
Yes, this is it was Super Friends and Extra Turns, and it was
Yup.
very tuned. And I hit that hill with my first commander deck where I improved it to the point of not being able to really improve it further,
Right.
and realized, wait, every time I play this deck, I either win or I get hated out. And that's not
Yeah.
fun for me. And when I win with this deck, it's not fun for my opponents. Wait, I need to care about the fun that my opponents are having? It turns out, yeah, in a 4-player game, you should
Yeah.
give some
You
thought to the
do.
experience of the other 3 players in the
Yep.
game.
Did you ever have that moment where you like attacked with Narset and cast like and got like an expropriate and the game just ended?
Yes.
And you were like, "Oh,
I didn't get to
I was
resolve my
excited.
spell.
On paper, this is really, really cool what I just did. But all it really amounted to was I attacked. My commander said, when you attack, you win the game, and that's not interesting."
Right. Yeah. So there was like 2 years of gap space when I came back to Corvold and realized that I was at the same place that I was at when I took apart Narset, for the same reason. And I mean, it was on a lesser level, I think, because Narset was a very expensive deck. I had a lot of very expensive cards in it. Corvold was made up of a much more. It wasn't a cheap deck, but it was definitely cheaper. It was probably a couple $100. But it was just a bunch of Jund sacrifice stuff. And
Right.
I started doing some thinking about what I want to play in Commander that I think is fun, that strikes the balance against not ruining my opponent's fun at the same time. And I've just been asking more and more questions and returning to the same questions, refining the process for myself. I do a lot of journaling, especially.
That's awesome.
Writing's a very useful processing tool for me.
Yeah.
And I every few months I post about it. I bang my drum, like spend 15 minutes asking yourself, why do you like playing Magic the Gathering? That's it. That's the assignment. Do that.
Yeah.
If you want more, you can go so much further, but oh my god, the number of people that we return to this discourse so often, the power levels and mixed expectations and people having
Right.
different understandings of what strong EDH is, or casual versus competitive. Is CEDH a 10? Is my deck a 7? All of these very silly subjective questions that we will never come to any kind of consensus on, because all of the answers are subjective.
Yeah. And then like the further you end up talking about that and like the more that you read the discourse and less time you spend, I think, just playing the game, it's very easy to get to this place where where discourse about Magic or reading about discourse, where like kind of magic Twitter, I mean, RIP Twitter, but like, that Magic sphere is kind of more the hobby, I feel like, for some people than playing Magic. And it's like a lot of that is very fun. A lot of that starts to feel like philosophy, and it feels very far removed from like any sense of actually playing the game. Just like deck building can sometimes feel for me. So it's a very different experience to like look at a list and be like, oh, this card just feels clunky and I don't love looking at it in this list. And I have this problem with a lot of precons. And then oftentimes I'll just go and play the precon and it'll be like, oh my God, this card is amazing. This card did everything that I needed it to do. I didn't even think about like this scenario that happened in this game. And like all of a sudden, like this card was just fantastic. Or like the opposite way around, where it's like, oh man, this card looks amazing in this list, and like it feels like it's doing everything the deck wants it to do. And then playing a few games with the deck and maybe being like, wow, the like scenario, maybe my meta is different, or maybe my perceptions were off, or maybe I just wasn't really thinking about like how how much this actually comes up in the game, but like, oh, this card just kind of sits in my hand and feels useless. That's where I got with a lot of the varied, with kind of what I was more spreading out, what was causing me to gain life in Dina rather than just kind of tuning into creatures entering or dying.
I really like the thought line of like spend more time playing Magic than thinking about Magic. I enjoy thinking about Magic, but oh my goodness, spend time playing the game. I think my thing with like taking time to self-reflect is because everything is subjective with asking what power levels mean. If you spend a few minutes thinking for yourself, what do you like about the game? What do you want to do in the game? And then you're able to communicate that, to figure out the words to communicate what you want, you will very easily be able to find other people who want that same experience.
Yeah.
Or at least you'll be able to communicate, let's say your play group is 4 people who get together every Saturday and that's the only people that you play with. You'll at least be able to communicate to those other people in your group what kind of experience you're wanting to get out of that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that I think a lot of people put a lot of stock in this idea of like even power levels, and I don't know. I think what you're saying is more important in a lot of ways, because I've definitely had games where the power levels were all, I would say the power levels were all roughly even, but the vibe was just off. But I've had like other games where I've just played like precons or like low quality, or, like someone else has been playing a precon, or like, the power levels are very varied and the games have still been like really, really good. I mean, I even think about, I want to say it's Game Nights. It's like old now. The like Bear Force 1 episode of Game Nights where Graham Stark is just playing like a bunch of vanilla tutus. And spoiler alert for like a 4-year-old episode of Game Nights at this point, like wins the game because everyone else just kind of tires themselves out. It's like awesome. But I mean, yeah, like I think that power levels being even is something that people get hung up on a lot. Yeah, and I don't think it actually tells you very much about some of these other questions about like why we like playing Magic.
Yeah, because thanks Empress Quinn for the turn of phrase, but like Commander is Smash Brothers. It's a board game. Yeah. It's high variance, explosive things can happen on a dime, and things can be wildly unbalanced in ways you can't plan for. Like, you can be really good at playing Smash Brothers, but the moment somebody picks up the hammer, being good doesn't matter as much anymore.
Right.
And Commander's the format that's famous for Sol Ring, and a turn 1 Sol Ring can famously warp an entire game into the phrase, sorry, my deck doesn't normally do that. And you can't rely on that phrase.
Yeah.
Because that's what the format's meant to do.
And I mean, case in point, like, I think that, like, the high variance is something that can actually be very rewarding to skill test against, even though I know sometimes it can feel, I think that's another axis that we keep coming back to in terms of Magic discourse, is this idea of variance. Is land screw good for the game? Is like something like Hearthstone or, like Duel Masters, where you can kind of guarantee that you have a certain amount of your resource every single turn, as opposed to like land screw or like whatever, is like topped at, is like the amount of variance that Magic has, like, does it, I don't know, I guess cheapen like the competitive format or like something? I mean, first off, competitive format, like, we're not even going there. I played competitive formats for years, and I think probably when we get into more of the guided self-reflection, I can see that coming up as a thing. But I think like being able to adapt to variance is like something that can be very rewarding for someone who has more of a competitive mindset. Maybe my opponent does have that, like amazing, perfect opening hand. Okay, like, how do I play around that? How do I, can I manipulate my opponents into being like, oh man, they have a Sol Ring, they have that, they're the threat, while I kind of quietly build up. Yeah, I think that Target, in like as far as Commander goes, I think in a multiplayer game like Target, like proper like target
Threat
identification,
assessment?
threat assessment. Thank you so much for saving my brain from spinning its wheels. Is really good.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, I think there's still some level of skill there, and like still, and I mean, I think like the variance. I think at the end of the day, even if you are someone who is more of like that, I want to analyze my games. I want to be playing optimally. I want competitive integrity or whatever. I think at the end of the day, like the high variance doesn't have to be something you put up with. Like I think it can still be a feature.
Yeah.
Right? Because like we're not playing chess.
No, we're definitely not playing
We don't. I don't
chess.
think any of us want to play. If we wanted to play chess, we would play chess.
But instead, we're playing Magic the Gathering because
Yeah.
sometimes we like to throw dragons against armies of little guys that will
Yeah.
inevitably either die or charge heroically. I think
Yeah.
it's the variance, not the variance. Oh my god, not the variance. The what's the word that I want? We'll figure it out. The fiction of it, is that really
Oh,
what
yeah.
it is? I think it's
Yeah.
the fiction of it, that there's just so much flavor in playing Magic.
Yep. I would agree because a lot of Magic players, a lot of like big professional Magic players, like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of us, even in the competitive scene, if we wanted to like really make some money or like really get something out of it, like squeeze more of the juice out of it, we'd go play poker, right? Like it's a lot of the same skills. But in poker, you're not casting dragons. You're not killing people with dragons. You're not playing almighty Brushwag and giving him 10 swords and sending him into an eldritch horror. You're not blocking Emrakul with 15 squirrels, right? Like I think the flavor and the narrative is definitely part of it. So I guess, yeah. I guess getting into like more, I guess we've already touched on a few of these things, but I guess getting into more like structured self-reflection, like I guess where are you at in terms of like what makes, trying to think of what, like where have you gotten to in terms of like the self-reflection? Like what are some questions you ask yourself and like what are some answers to like those questions?
Yeah. Why do I play Magic, and specifically why do I play Commander? I think is one that I spend a lot of time thinking on. The answer is a couple key points. I think it's because I want to innovate. I enjoy deck building. I view deck building as part of playing the game of Magic the Gathering, the same way that I view making a character is part of the game in playing Dungeons and Dragons. And I have fun deck building. I spend 90% of my time playing Magic as a deck builder, I think. But that's just because I spend a lot of time on brews, and a lot of them end up getting crumbled and thrown into the wastebasket.
Yeah.
I go through ideas relatively quickly, and not all of them make it to playtest. But I'm always in search of something new that I think is interesting, or to discover a different facet of a card synergy, or playing a card that I've never heard of before that I think the effect is neat, that kind of thing. I like to innovate. That's the first point. I want to find things that feel unique to play and that are fun to me. And that requires me to ask myself the question, well, what do I think is fun? What qualifies as fun when I am playing it? And there's a few answers. I like to play dinosaurs. I like the effects that do like ability counters. I like graveyard synergies. Those are easy answers. But I think the feeling that I'm trying to capture is I want to pull off trick shots. That's my nirvana in Commander. I want to do something weird and cool. I want to cast Cosmic Intervention and sacrifice Colony Heart Expedition and 2 fetch lands so that I can rip a bunch of basics out of my library in one turn cycle.
Yeah, you did something really disgusting with Colony Heart Expedition in a recent game we played.
It was probably brought back or Cosmic Intervention because I love those cards in conjunction with one another.
Yeah, you definitely did. You definitely did like keep bringing back a Colony Heart expedition a lot of times. I think it was various things. Like I think it might have
I
been like
also
a Sun Titan
Titan it.
effect
Yeah,
at one
there we go.
point. I think it was a cosmic intervention at one point. Yeah, no, it was kind of crazy the amount of ramp you were doing with that. Definitely did feel like a trick shot for sure. I think we were all like, "What is she doing?" Yeah.
Or like in Dominus Rex when I discard Emrakul to get the flying counter and then pay the 6 colorless madness cost that you don't think a 3-color deck should be capable of doing, and then get to cast Emrakul the World Anew
I
alongside
think
Indominus.
that post of yours, the one about Emrakul, I think that was the first post. I think that is the post that I found you off of.
Oh,
Unironically.
that's very
I
funny.
want to say either someone I followed at the time, probably like Quinn, someone in that Quinn, Val, someone in that circle had reposted it. But I remember you were having a conversation about making, or you were having a conversation or had a post about making your Nominus Rex be able to do that frequently. And I think that was one of the first posts I saw from you for sure. Definitely one of the first posts. It might have been the first.
It might have been for me. It also might have been. There's a tweet that Quinn made sometime after I demonstrated that to both Quinn and Cole separately, where Quinn was just. I don't think that Faye tagged me in it, but I did find it just because of the algorithm, where it was all of us talking about how Emrakul has 6 windings in her mana cost and how that's impossible to cast in Commander. And meanwhile, Light figures out a way to do it in a 3-color deck reliably because, wow, skill issue on all of you.
Yeah, that's wild. I do. Yeah, you haven't done this to me yet. I'm terrified of it. Yeah, it's very cool. Very cool.
My favorite reaction from people when I play a deck that has happened multiple times is when I ramp a basic wastes onto the battlefield and people ask with panic in their heart, why did you put a basic waste onto the battlefield?
Why?
Waste? It doesn't make any sense for you to grab a basic wastes. What is this doing here? There's only one thing in the game that requires colorless mana like this, and it's all terrifying.
Look, we put Eldrazi DNA in the Indominus Rex so that she would be able to survive on Costa Rica for some reason. Yeah, I don't know. It's you know what, Dr. Wu, he was just up to some crazy shit.
He was up to some shit. So, yeah, I like to do things that take advantage of niche case scenarios in order to produce Magic the Gathering effects that are either wildly powerful or ridiculously silly, like creating an eternalized zombie token and then mutating onto it and then populating the mutate stack.
So how do you tend to balance this with, because I think I would say something else I've noticed about you that I think I point out is like, you tend to do like these things pretty consistently. You tend to do something powerful pretty consistently. And I think that something that definitely can be a bit of a downside about the idea of uniqueness and like innovation, especially when it comes to deck building, is kind of sacrificing a lot of consistency for it. I think that we've all been there where we've tried to brew around a really obscure idea or a really niche synergy or mechanic and realized that we're trying to brew around like 3 decent cards and maybe 5 bad ones in a 100 card singleton format, right? Yeah. That's definitely where a lot of my decks end up in the waste paper basket. So like, is that a consideration for you? Because I would not say that you are the type of player who plays decks that I would call inconsistent or like low or like, I guess meme. Like I wouldn't say that you play decks that are running cards that are bad because they fit the theme. I would say that you play a lot of decks that run cards that are very good for the scenarios that you want to create, even if they are not maybe traditionally good cards.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely a factor. I so I have I think that's a good way of putting it. The idea that I look for cards to play together that create generally powerful effects, even though they would not traditionally be considered powerful on their own. I look for ways to make the cards that do the effects that I like better at doing that thing. Like Colony Heart Expedition is a perfectly fair and balanced magic card on its own. But I like the effect of sacrificing a permanent to look through my library for more than one land and then put those lands onto the battlefield. So I ask myself, what is the way that I make Colony Heart Expedition broken? And the easy answer is just reuse Colony Heart Expedition. And I
Right.
look for the ways to push that to a 10 or an 11.
And yeah.
Because I don't like cards that I find boring. Maybe that's the easiest way. I don't like easy answers. I mean, I have a whole thing about Soul Ring and Arcane
Right.
Signet and Command Tower. I don't like
Which,
to play cards that feel like I'm just playing them because they're powerful. I like my decks to be. You rightfully accused me recently of being a very cohesive deck builder, and a visualization that I have is that each card in a deck is like a Tetris block. And they
right.
fit together in a very specific way. All of my 100 fit together in a very specific way when I build a deck. And when you're playing Tetris, you have to build around what you have, what the
Yep.
order that the blocks come
Yep.
down in to create the structure. And the worst ones are always the big chunks, like the four of that just it's a square that is hard to
Yeah.
fit somewhere. Even though it takes up a good amount of space, and you can get two rows out at once when you have the square in the right spot at the right time. It also means that there's less room to build uniquely around that square. I think that cards like Soul Ring, while generically very powerful, are taking up one deck slot out of your 99 that loses any chance in most cases to do anything interesting. It's
Yep.
just you play Soul Ring because Soul Ring is powerful.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this before I went to Colossal Con North. You inspired me to remove Soul Ring from Dina, as well as actually every source of artifact ramp in Dina. I'm no longer running Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, or the Golgari Talisman in that
My
deck.
influence grows.
And instead I actually thought about like what the deck needed and realized that the mana curve in the deck is so low. There is not a single card unless you count like the one X spell, which by the way is Court of Calling, so like that one usually ends up not costing very much either. The mana curve in this deck is so low, it tops out at 5. There's nothing in this deck that is higher than 5 mana. I have 37 lands if you count the 3 MDFCs I'm running. Most things in the deck, like most of the sack outlets are not like mana activated abilities. So I kind of tuned my ramp package around the idea that I need very little ramp in this deck. 5 drops landing on turn 5 is usually fine. 4 drops landing on turn, like there's like ramp is more acceleration than it is like I need to get to this spell at all, which I think can kind of be the case for a lot of higher level or a lot of like higher curves. And the like chance that I end up with like a completely unplayable hand or like a completely unplayable game because I am cut off from ramp and like cut off from these like Soul Ring Signet type effects is like very, very low because of so much of my curve being somewhere between the 1 and 3 range. And then like I was just noticing like those cards would come up like Soul Ring isn't actually all that good when a lot of your cards are like 1 a green and a black or 1 black mana cost. or when a lot of your activated abilities are colored mana. Like Arcane Signet, Soul Ring, like that type of ability isn't all that, like Arcane Signet and Talisman isn't all that good when your commander is 2 mana and you most often want to just cast her on turn 2 so that you can kind of, start utilizing her ability on turn 3. And obviously Soul Ring doesn't even accelerate your commander out either, because she's a black and a green. So, like, once I had that idea, I think that helped to kind of soften the blow. And there are obviously terrible top decks. I have definitely lost games with Dina before because I top deck both Soul Ring and Arcane Signet. Whereas a lot of the ramp that I put in is, like, fine. Like, maybe not the most amazing draw, but it's, like, fine. Like, I think it's generally okay to draw Steve late, especially if I have a Blood Artist on the board. I think it's generally okay. I mean, it's actually usually pretty great to draw Traverse the Ulvenwald. Great. That was one of the cards that went in place of Soul Ring. Which is just, the Dina deck is very specifically really hums with a food creator or a Cauldron Familiar or a Blood Artist more than not. So having a card that can go tutor those, but also provide me consistency in the early game is really good. Yeah, so I think, I don't know, I'm rambling, but yeah, I took out, yeah. I guess, I don't know, should I be thinking about these questions? Should I try and answer these questions for myself?
Well,
I don't know what our order is here.
You want to tackle the question, why do you play Magic and what do you enjoy about playing Magic? Because I don't know, maybe real quick, I'll also say I like innovating and I like doing things that I like pulling off trick shots.
Yeah.
I also like I don't know, the Magic is the gathering. I like talking to people about Magic. I like playing Magic with my friends. And I would like to play Magic decks that make my friends want to continue playing Magic with me.
Yeah. There are kind of two aspects to this question, I think, for me. And there are kind of two things that I've noticed tend to draw me to games. I really like games. So I played League of Legends for the longest time. And this is important, don't worry. I most often played League of Legends duo queue. So that's where you're playing League of Legends competitively and you're playing League of Legends with a partner. And I found myself drawn to League players who were what we call one-trick ponies, or maybe not one-tricks, but who basically League players who are very specialized in a certain area. So League of Legends is a game that has a lot of different characters who can be played in a lot of different positions on the map, so kind of a lot of different roles, and who are a lot of different classes. So I liked to know, and I like to kind of play with and like observe and kind of get in the brain of like, maybe someone I play with only plays mage type characters. And I'd be really interested in knowing like, why do you play those characters? Like, what is appealing about this? Like what appeals to you about this? I had a friend who would only play a specific character and I would be like, kind of like studying them in a way and being like, I don't know, it just fascinated me to know, to kind of live vicariously through people who enjoyed things that I didn't necessarily enjoy that much myself. And I think that Commander is like really also does that for me, because when people sit down and pull out their Commander deck and place their commander in the command zone, it tells you something about them. And I find it really fascinating to see what commanders, deck archetypes, colors people gravitate towards. And I think that Magic is just another one like League where like people tend to develop an identity in Magic. There are not a lot of people, and most of those people are pros. And even at the pro level, there are not a lot of people who are just like, yeah, I'm not really known for anything. I just play whatever. I don't really have any strong affinity towards certain cards or certain archetypes. Even at the professional level, that is not the case most of the time. I mean, on a broad level, I guess it's kind of the case, but everyone, you know...
When you hear the name Reed Duke, you think Jund.
Exactly. He's played other stuff, sure, but you think Jund. Yeah, so like kind of like that. So, and I think that really speaks to like one of the things that draws me to Magic is just how customizable the experience is. There are so many different formats. Within those formats, there are so many different decks. There are 5 colors, you know, there are 5 colors, 10 2-color pairings. There's colorless, right? There are, 9 card types now. There are so many different characters, different legendary creatures, so many different cards in the game. And any one of those things, someone could have a really strong affinity towards. People could have strong affinity towards card types, deck archetypes, colors or color combinations, creature types, a certain planeswalker character, like a certain legendary creature, right? Like, there's a lot of room in Magic to kind of plant your flag and go, this is who I am. And I think that I like doing that myself. But honestly, I think a lot of my draw with Magic to that is that I get to see other people do that. And it's very cool to me, and I'm not really sure why. So that I guess is kind of part 1.
I can relate to part 1 of the answer a bit.
And then
No, go ahead.
Part 2, I think, is the Magic as media. We were talking about the narrative earlier, right? Why don't we all play poker or chess? Because we want to cast fucking dragons. There are a lot of, I think that, you know, Magic could be played. You could play Magic. There does not have to be art on these cards, right? These cards could be called anything. They could have, you know, it doesn't have to be. The text on the cards, the rules of the game could be flavored anyway. I mean, we get this with Planes and Universes Beyond, right? Magic, there's a lot of different flavors to Magic. Someone who likes Bloomburrow doesn't necessarily like Duskmourn or New Phyrexia, or maybe they do. I think seeing Bloomburrow creatures Phyrexianized would have been amazing. It could just be a playtest card that says the abilities, right? We could play Magic almost like a computer program. You know, if this card sees another card die, make a treasure, right? Make a card that taps for mana, right? Like, we could remove the flavor from Magic.
We don't need to know, for the game to function, we don't need to know that, is it Merciless Execute? No, it's not Merciless Executioner. Pitiless Plunderer. We don't need to know that Pitiless Plunderer is a pirate, and we don't need to know that he's sitting on a treasure chest his art, or that he has a dramatic, huge hat that gives so much character. But those things just
add so much. And it's so cool to me that, like, I made my Sharam deck. You know this. There are text receipts of this. My Sharam the Hedgeman deck was made with the idea that when I sit down and when I play this deck in game, I am going to feel like the emotions that are evoked in me on the Art of Sharam the Hedgeman. That is what that deck is designed to do. It is designed for me to get to sit there and say no to my opponents and cast these big, horrifying sphinxes and artifacts that are arbiters of my will and kind of just sit, you know, unfazed by everything as my opponents get more and more desperate for my approval and, you know, get more and more worried about this machine that I am constructing. Like that, like the goal of the deck, the mechanical goal of that deck is, even though you can separate the mechanics of Magic from the flavor, the mechanical goal that that deck was built with cannot be separated from the flavor, because the mechanical goal came entirely from the art came from who this, this is a sphinx, and like this is a sphinx from Esper, and like the, metatextual connotations that we as Magic players assume from that. It's even taken, like, that deck, like, I have had Charm together in some form or another for 16 years. So, like, there is even not only the flavor of who Charm the Hedgeman is in Magic and what she looks like on the art, and, the flavor of her being this mechanically, metallically, magically enhanced Sphinx, but also, she is my wife of 16 years. Like, there is also the flavor to me as the flavor of my relationship with this card as a player. And I think that a big part about Magic for me is kind of these almost like parasocial relationships that we naturally build with decks and characters and like the game itself and how we interact with Magic as a game.
There can be a lot of identity wrapped up in our decks from us as players. I mean, that's why so many people care every time we get another piece of queer representation in the characters on Magic. That's why we love Alacia so much, and Nico, and how everyone wishes that Ashiok got more screen time because
and braids. Let's be real. Oh, we need braids. Void mommy, nightmare
jingle,
mommy.
The keys, jingle, 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 jingle.
Okay, sorry.
There's just not. I don't know. Everyone gets excited every time we get more of that because there's a lot of queer people that play Magic the Gathering, and we like seeing that's an aspect that people can care about. We like seeing reflections of ourselves in the decks that we play.
I mean, I think the most interesting example of this for me is why I played Mardu Pyromancer for so long in competitive 60, I guess 75 card if you count sideboard modern. Because I don't really care all that much. I mean, I like the idea of Young Pyromancer, but like Chandra is not my favorite character. Young Pyromancer, Elemental, like they're cool, but I mean, I think we can agree. I think you can agree from what you've seen of me as a Magic player. That's not necessarily my vibe. I built Mardu Pyromancer because I had a strong affinity to Mardu because of Mardu Aristocrats from Standard that I had played back in like RTR Innistrad Standard, because I really liked the art of Falconwrath Aristocrat and Cartel Aristocrat. And that was my first time ever playing an Aristocrats, like that Blood Artist Aristocrats, sacrifice your own creatures, kind of aggro combo shell where, you're kind of doing a lot on the stack and doing a lot with your board state of sacrificing your creatures to ping your opponents, to grow your creatures, or like get some of, or like protect your other creatures, and like making token fodder. And like the amount of my identity as a Magic player that has now been built on the foundation of I think Cartel Aristocrat and Falconwrath Aristocrat are really, really hot has like mechanically, I build a lot of decks around sacrifice. Black is one of my favorite colors, right? One of my signature cards is like Carrion Feeder that I don't love the art of, like Carrion Feeder and Viscera. I don't love the art on either of those cards. The flavor of those cards doesn't really speak to me, but mechanically, those cards are my jam, and the reason they're my jam mechanically is because once upon a time I found Cartel Aristocrat and Falconwrath Aristocrat really hot. I mean, Immersturm Predator.
Seer, like I should call her.
Immersturm Predator is really cool in its own way. It's a fucking vampire dragon. There's only 2 of those in the game.
Oh, I forgot that was a vampire dragon.
Yeah, Immersturm Predator is amazing. A lot. I mean, I would probably like that card on its own. I probably wouldn't like it as much as I do if it wasn't evocative of Falconwrath Aristocrat, which is, again, a card that I liked because I thought the art was hot. And now I love stuff like Sylvar, Devourer Freedom, another, like, all those, like, kind of Butcher of the Horde, right? Like, all those kind of cards. Yeah. So I think that is why I play Magic, is the narrative. Let's say in quotate, if we're putting this up on a PowerPoint, right, and we're putting a bullet point list, we're going to call this point for the quote unquote plot.
I play Magic for the plot.
Yeah. But also, I mean, just the narratives that come up in games, right? I alluded earlier to the idea of suiting up an almighty brushwag with like 10 swords and like swinging at someone, right? Like the ridiculous things that happen because on some level this game is also narrative Mad Libs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think we've all tried to explain flavorfully why like certain combos work, or like what is happening when certain combos are going off, or like, you know, we've all had like that one game where some innocuous little card becomes the main character of the game.
Yeah, no, I have a really good example of this. I was playing a game where I was getting my face stomped in, and I was playing with Jen and Donnie and Beth, Queen of Cardboard, and then the two halves of Filthy MTG Casuals. And I was just losing so badly. And all I had left on the battlefield was a 1/1 citizen from Citizen's Crowbar that I had created. And that citizen became my number one priority. I would not block with him. I spent a protection spell to keep him from getting blown up in a board wipe. And I refused to let that citizen die because he was all I had left.
Amazing. And that generates its own level of fun too, you know? Like that, like not only is Magic a board game, not only is Magic Smash Bros, in some ways Magic is also D&D and improv theater.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how on the Praetor's First Change stream when we were playing Plane Chase, and the cards just kept flipping into like things that were really good for my Valgavoth deck, and eventually I was like, I don't think we ever left the house. I think that these planes are just Valgavoth fucking with you guys. You know, and like it was very much like I have to go back to some of those Praetors for Change games, because really those games, it's so funny to me when people say that, like, I think on some level maybe, but it's so funny to me when people like accuse like gameplay show, like Magic gameplay channels of like being scripted. Because, like, no, like, fam, like, that shit just happens sometimes. I think I even made a joke on, like, the game that I was playing with Hen, and, oh, man, the details of that game are fuzzy to me. But I remember going, like, are we scripted right now? Like, what is happening? It's very funny.
Sometimes when you play Magic the Gathering with people that you enjoy playing Magic with, it just... the stars align in certain ways, and the funniest thing possible happens, and you could have never predicted it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's why I play Magic, which is a really long answer.
That was a really long answer, and that's okay.
So I'll keep the next one short. What do I enjoy playing about Magic? What do I enjoy about playing Magic? I enjoy converting resources into other resources, and I enjoy manipulating my opponents. I enjoy breaking the rules, I guess.
Yeah.
I think the best examples of these things are I don't know, I enjoy doing the unexpected in a way. I think I think probably the best example of these are my Feldergriff deck and my Valgavoth deck. Valgavoth is a very weird deck the way I've built it, even though the commander is, as far as all things are considered, fairly generically powerful, because I took he has the clause of, like, you know, the first time an opponent loses life on their turn, you draw a card and you put a counter on him. And I realized that a lot of those, like, you know, that, like, people draw cards on each of their turns, presumably. So, like, all those, like, Underworld Dreams stuff work really well with him. And then, like, all those, like, like, the Black Vise type cards also trigger on, like, your opponent's turns. So, like, those cards just, as long as you have one of those cards out and it's just, like, active, it's feeding Valgavoth. But then those cards encourage you to make your opponents draw cards. So you end up with this really weird group slug deck that is both killing people by both punishing people for having resources and also giving them the resources to attempt to avoid punishment. And a lot of people, I think a lot of, like, people would call that, oh, this is a deck building tension. Like, you're kind of, you're just giving your opponents, you're playing group slug, you shouldn't be giving your opponents easy ways to deal with you. But I find like it's just led to like a lot of interesting moments where people are like, man, I really want these cards, but I really want to stop taking damage. But also I really want your cards.
I would like to continue drawing my resources to do the things I built my deck to do. But also, ow, please stop.
Yep. And that deck, I think, has one of my favorite cards for everything that we've been talking about, which is Pain's Reward.
God, Pain's Reward is such a funny Magic
Pain's Reward
card.
is such a funny Magic card. We'll talk more in depth about it later.
I love cards that say bid and then keep going until somebody resolves the bid.
Yep. Feldegriff, I think, is the other example of like converting interesting resources. I would say that Valgaboth is converting kind of resources in the sense of you're paying a cost by giving your opponents resources. So it's less that you're converting your own resources and more you're converting the opportunity cost of giving your opponents resources, but you're converting it into like a buttload of damage, especially because those effects start to stack really quickly when you have multiple of them out there. I had a game where I was playing with him where I was making everyone take 11 damage on their draw step. Wild. So Feldegriff, the resource that Feldegriff has is mana and board presence. And what he converts it into is your opponent's goodwill. And this deck is very interesting because I've had scenarios where, say, someone has I had a game recently, actually, where I had a scenario where someone had a, like, veto. I think it was the enchantment snake. That's whenever you gain life, target opponent loses life. And I was like, hey, there's a problem. There's a problem player. I can make you gain 2 life. Will you turn that into 2 damage at this opponent who is a problem? And it turned Feldegriff from a, pay white, I think it gets flying for white, target opponent gains 2 life, to pay white, target opponent takes 2 damage. Also, one time I killed someone with Feldegriff with that ability because I had a buttload of treasures and they had a Marina Vendrell's Grimoire. And Marina Vendrell's Grimoire does not stop you from losing from decking out.
No, it doesn't.
It is not a May ability.
I was looking at that for my pilot Indominus Rex deck when I was thinking about ways that the deck just quickly churned through its 80 cards. And I thought about the Grimoire, and I'm like, this doesn't actually stop me from losing the game. It just makes it better to have a bunch of cards in hand.
Yeah.
And then I made a post about Ormos. Is that what the card is?
Yeah, Ormos.
And there we go.
That guy's awesome. He's very cool. I like that he just becomes a 30/30 if you activate his ability with no cards in your library.
It's a very compelling, you have 1 turn to not die. I think a reason we get on so well as, like, deck builders is because on some core level, the Venn diagram between us is larger in the middle than it is on the sides.
Yeah. It's very close to a circle. It's a very fucked up circle, but it's very close to a circle.
I also really enjoy turning X resource into Y resource and asking questions like the example of turning mana into opportunity cost is just a really interesting axis to think on. When you thinking about the people playing the game beyond just the mechanics of what the cards do and what you said about manipulating your opponents, that really comes across when you start thinking about how can you use your opponent's action as a resource in a game that is inherently Smash Brothers.
And man, Feldegriff is such a good deck for that. I love using Feldegriff. Feldegriff often ends up, as long as you are not the weakest player at the table, although even if you are, you can often get the second weakest. Often what Feldegriff will end up doing is taking the person who is in taking basically the least scary person, picking them up, shaking them for their lunch money, and then tossing them at the most scary person or at your enemies, which is like a thing that you can't really do in a non-social game, right? You can't really just give someone a bunch of resources if you can't also be like, hey, societal convention.
Yeah.
Don't be a dick to me.
I don't know. I think, I mean, along the comparison of like Commander as a board game, another board game that comes to mind that also has a lot of variance and is also multiplayer is like Risk. You know, nobody plays nice in Risk. The game is built around theoretically strategic decisions, but you're always at the whim of the dice going wrong. And you don't just do nice things for your opponent for the giggles in a game of Risk.
Yeah. I think Feldegriff also like combos well with my opponent's decks, and it's very fun to do combo attacks sometimes. Like I was playing a game where I had Feldegriff and my opponent had a Goblin Bombardment, and we had another opponent who just kept making very hard to deal with permanent, like very like scary creatures. And so I would just feed hippos into the Goblin Bombardment to take out these like combo piece creatures before they were a problem, because neither of us could actually, he could not generate enough creatures to make Goblin Bombardment a viable kill spell, and I had no way of actually dealing like damage or taking out these creatures available to me at the time. But because both of us had these game pieces that combo with each other's boards, we were like, yeah, this is a problem for both of us. We're going to set aside our differences.
Bombardment. That's so funny.
I mean, let's be honest about what Feldegriff is as a deck. It's the CIA. There's a reason I call that deck the Liars Club. It's the CIA. It's destabilizing my opponents. And their alliances with each other.
I was thinking of the beavers from the board game Root, but yes, also the CIA is an apt description.
Yeah, so I guess, yep, that's why I enjoy playing Magic. I don't know, I think I also feel the trick shots thing. I think I also feel the innovate thing. I don't know, I think I feel it. I think where our Venn diagram stops overlapping is I think we have the same goals, and we enjoy the same things, just in a different way. I think it's really cool, your idea of like, I want to discard Emrakul to Indominus Rex and pay the Madness cost and like make that work in a 3-color deck. I think that's really cool. I love to see it. I would love to see you do it in a game. That is not something that like I would personally build around.
It is a bit of a niche thing.
And I feel like the same could be said, like, I don't know how much you actually like. I feel like I tend to get the vibe that you don't like doing loops all that much. And like one of my favorite things to do is turn like Cauldron Familiar and a few food tokens into an Underworld Breach that's getting back a Lightning Bolt over and over again. I love that play. I love that play pattern in Dina so much because of how quickly Cauldron Familiar with like an Essence Warden and a Dina becomes a Lightning Bolt that just keeps coming back over and over and over again. I have done like combo turns with Dina that are so fun because they're not like just, oh, I have 2 cards on the field, I automatically win. It's like, hold on a minute, how much damage can I actually do to you? Because there is an upper limit. It just might not matter if you're at a low enough life total. I don't know, my Dina Soul Steeper deck, like, there is a reason why this deck was the one that got me back into Magic. Which is interesting.
I don't think I do play a whole lot of looping effects most of the time. I play a lot of synergy pieces that, like, whenever you X, do Y, but I don't tend to make the same exact input of what X is to do the Y, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to reuse the same creature over and over to get an effect type of thing. The one exception would be my Zakama deck, which is very much Zakama's Bounce House with Temur Sabertooth, where the win cons all involve looping Zakama to produce infinite mana.
Oh,
and then
Zakama's... Oh, that's such a good... Sorry, go on. But that's such a good example of something that I was just about to bring up, too.
To produce infinite mana and, like, find a win con with her, that's really all it is. It's just, I have infinite mana with Zakama, now what do I funnel it into? And the answer is either Aetherflux Reservoir or a Ravenous Tyrannid so that I can draw my entire deck. Because if you have Temur, Sabertooth, and Zakama and infinite mana, you can just turn the bouncing to the Tyranid and just cast for Ravenous, cast for Ravenous, cast for Ravenous. There's actually one Tyranid in the deck that acts as a win condition, because you can put yourself to 9 million life and then cast Tervigon, I think. No, not Tervigon. It's the red one with the cannon on its back. That name I am forgetting. But when you cast it, it's a X damage spell to all creatures and all players that are not it.
Ooh.
And so you just use it as essentially a fireball.
With Sabertooth, yeah. That's rad. And I mean, yeah, that's actually such a good example of one of the other things I was going to mention, especially around Dina. And I was going to say, Dina's not usually my typical style of deck. I think she does a lot of things that I usually do, but she tends to be a bit more aggressive than I tend to play. But this deck actually does not go to combat often. So Dina, I really like doing things that are maybe not the most innovative if you just look at what the card is essentially doing, but are innovative for the color. We've all played against an Impact Tremors deck. How often have you played against an Impact Tremors deck in Golgari? We've all played against, I think you have as your like subtitle for your Zakama deck, Ravenous and Goad are control mechanics, right? We've all played against a blue-white control deck with like a combo finish. How often have you played against that in Naya? Like, I think that's definitely something that I like, that I think falls under that I want to innovate sphere.
I want to innovate fear. Put it on a t-shirt.
Oh, sphere.
Oh,
but
okay,
yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Fear, maybe a little bit of fear as well, the fear of not innovating. And now I'm thinking I need more Impact Tremors effects in Dina now that we're talking about this. And I might have to throw, oh gosh, what is it? Social Climber back in the deck.
Social Climber, is that the one? Yep, it's Alliance Gain a Life. That's what it is.
Yep, I think we might have to throw, I think there's a pretty good, I think I'm getting to the point, maybe I have to throw that in there. Maybe I have to throw Leyline of Vitality into Dina. I may have to throw Leyline of Vitality into Dina. That seems really bad, but I may have to do it.
Innovation's happening
it's an Impact
live
Tremors.
on stream? Recording.
It's a 4-mana Impact Tremors or a 0-mana Impact Tremors, depending.
It is potentially one every 20 games. It'll be a 0-mana Impact Tremors.
I think that's probably bad. I think that adding like Traverse the Uvenwald probably makes the ability of the deck to be Impact Tremors go up significantly.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think it's fine. I think it's fine for the deck to mostly be Blood Artist. Like Aristocrats it's fine. Like, I think it's doing it in an interesting way because it's kind of, it's turning like Starscape Cleric into City on Fire. It's turning like Dina with the Blood Artist into like a damage doubler type effect, right? I think that even though the deck is using these kind of pieces that we do traditionally associate with black, like Blood Artist, it's the whole Dina deck is very red to me. This is a very red deck. I've said before, like, the tea is so scalding hot that it's red, that the deck is red, even though it's green-black. I do view Dina as, like, a mono-red or, like, Boros deck in a lot of ways.
I think I feel more like I'm playing against a Rakdos deck when I'm playing against Dina most of the time.
Yeah, that's
even
also
though you
fair.
do gain a chunk of life. Like, the deck converts life gain into damage, but at the same time, it's not really the life gain that you're scared of in any real way. You're scared of the deck, of the turn that you decide to put your foot on the gas and start trying to burn the table out.
The turn where I go, ooh, you're a problem. Can I kill you? That deck has had so many moments of like... That deck has had so many moments of just like, ugh, I cannot deal with this player. They are such a huge threat to me. I can't interact with their stuff. Player removal is permanent removal. And I like kind of look at my Cauldron Familiar, look at my board, and I'm like, I think I can assemble something. I think even when Dina leaves you like really resourceless, usually if you go for it for one player, the nice thing is that you chunk out the other players too. And like usually at the end of like if you get to the point where you're like, I can't do anything else and people are still alive, you're at least at like 50 life. So it's like, all right, you have like one turn and then maybe I can do it again. Yeah. I think I just like taking a lot of game actions and I like being a problem, really, what it boils down to. I think a lot of my decks are very loud.
I think that's inside the middle of the Venn diagram. A lot of my decks are also very loud.
Yep. A lot of my decks really insist upon them. A lot of my decks really insist upon being there at the table. Even the sneakier ones, even like Feldegrif, I think really reminds you that he's there. Yeah. I think we've all had the games where like someone just goes kind of unnoticed and then like kind of comes in at the end and sweeps it because no one was paying attention to them. And I don't think I really have those games very much. I don't think I tend to be that player because I'm like, even when I'm playing the game with Dina, every time that I stream a game with Dina, and like play it in general, but especially when I stream, I'm like, if I see like a very aggro option that is likely to just get me like knocked out first, but will like, deal like 15 damage to someone, or like if I'm on stream, I'm coming out with Dina guns blazing if I have the option.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to make friends. I'm not going to lie low for the perfect opportunity. I'm going to play my burn cards out, and I'm going to be a burn player, and I'm going to burn the table.
Yeah, I get that energy. When, I think it was either yesterday, I don't remember, it was recent, Bobby Christine tweeted, or skeeted, there we go. She posted on Blue Sky that she felt, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit because I don't remember the exact statement, that she had has a lot of pride wrapped up in her deck building. And I think the topic was like around a Secret Santa exchange for building decks and then giving them away, and how she only ever wants to...
you have no idea how much I want that.
She only ever wants to play her own decks because of the attachment that she has to them. And I felt that. I feel the same thing. When I'm playing a deck, especially if I'm playing on stream, one of my goals is I want to show off the thing that I built my deck to do. Because if I was confident enough to bring a deck list to a streamed game, it's because I've already spent 100+ hours thinking about this deck and play testing it. And I want it to be demonstrated that much effort was put into it. I like being a good player in Magic. I feel like I am a fairly good, capital G, period, player in Commander. But what I really want to do is to show off the deck and the cool, interesting things that I built it to do. Sometimes those things require me to be a good Magic player because they are wonky and the payoff is strong, but the input is weird.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so I didn't come to sit on open blue mana for 10 turns. I came to cast 4 dinosaurs that all have trample and very large power.
Right. Yeah. I think that like me too, like I like showcasing things. It can even just be a card. The stream that I did with Base Messiah X recently, which was a very, very fun game. Sharam did not necessarily do like what she was supposed to do. I ended up getting out like a prototype portal, which is a card that I think I'm gonna cut. But like I didn't like really draw into like many of my like value cards. So like mostly I was kind of draw going a little bit and like maybe presenting one threat. But the threat kept being a Sphinx Sovereign that kept getting answered and kept getting reanimated. And then I was making tokens of it with Prototype Portal. And like I was just so content with that game, despite probably being on the back foot for the entirety of it, because I just got to make the game about Sphinx Sovereign, and I got to play this 2008 card in 2024 and have it like be a thing that people aimed removal at. Like that's what sparked joy for me, was being like, I think when the game ended, I was like, I was one turn away from killing you with Sphinx Sovereign.
I think that's something that attracts me to playing with people is similar to what you shared earlier, like getting to see what their brain came up with and how their personality comes across and the things they attach to. One of my favorite things about playing with you is the mixture between high skill Magic player, obviously high skill Magic player, and the 2010 bulk rare, the Shivan Dragon factor. You have the Shivan Dragon factor when you are building your decks, because there is no powerful excuse for playing Sphinx of the Steel Winds in 2024, but that was a non-negotiable include in your very powerful and very scary Shroom control deck. And I love that.
Yeah,
I
of
love
course.
that there's just this giant, inefficient 6/6 with a bunch of keywords on it that you forced into the 99, asterisk forced, because, like, she exists there. It's not...
she's been scary. Oh, no, it's definitely not to the detriment.
And I really enjoy that. I really enjoy that you're the kind of person that's like, I want to build a deck around the idea of twin-headed dragon.
Yeah.
How many fire-breathing dragons can we play in this deck?
Oh, heck yeah. When I think the few times I've cast Sphinx Sovereign, not Sphinx Sovereign, Sphinx Sovereign 2, but, actually, probably one of the best cards of this, Filigree Angel. Do you know what Filigree Angel does? It's an intro pack rare from Shards of Alara.
I'm aware of what Filigree Angel does.
It is an 8 mana 4/4 with flying, Artifact Angel. When it enters, you gain 3 life for each artifact you control. I play this card in conjunction with Marina Vendrell's Grimoire, and I draw 30 cards. I have never had that thing hit the board and gain me less than 20 life. That thing always stabilizes me. Often I will play it twice because I will play it and then play it from my graveyard. That card is bad. Like, that card is not good. If we're looking at it, it costs 1 more than Platinum Angel, which is also a card that is also a card that is in that deck, funny enough. But, like, a card that says you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game, and has also been largely power crept out of Magic, despite that.
And is also way easier
to cast. There's, like, the new Angel that's Platinum Angel, but not an artifact. I mean, like, if we're talking about, like, 8 drops, you know, in blue, white, black, there's stuff like Moonshaker Cavalry, there's Avacyn, but, like, you know, there's even, like, Sphinx's Revelation, right? It's like, nope, I'm playing Filigree Angel, and it's largely a very impactful card, even in this year. Gaining 20 life is good.
It's very good. It's half your starting life total. You look for the places that cards fit together. Filigree Angel is great with the aforementioned Grimoire. Sphinx of the Steel Wind.
Oh, yep.
It's a giant dragon. That's really all it is. But when you tutor up...
It blocks for me.
It blocks really well, and you can tutor up a Sword of X and Y and slap it on there, and then suddenly you've got a very hard-to-remove creature.
Yep.
That's just big and has lifelink, question mark? Does it have lifelink?
Yeah, it has lifelink. It has lifelink and first strike. There were numerous situations in, like, a game that I played fairly recently where I had this sword and I had this Sphinx, and people were like, oh, I have this creature that basically I can, like, I forget what the creature was. It was something that they could basically give it, like, +1/+0 or, like, +X/+0, and it had, like, trample, and it was terrifying, and it was, like, could one-shot my life total. I'm like, my Sphinx over here has protection and first strike. Like, you're not killing me. And they were like, I had a game in 2024 where all of my opponents were like, oh my god, we have to deal with the Sphinx of the Steel Wind. Like, this thing is impossible to deal with. I don't have any removal that deals with it.
It's the oh my gosh, not Disciple. Oh my gosh, the Zatalpa theorem. Like, you don't necessarily always have the 8 to 10 mana giant hard to remove beater on the battlefield, but once it's there, you die or you have a path to exile.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yep. You know, at the end of the day, when your life total goes to 0, it doesn't really matter if it was a Primeval Titan or a Colossal Dreadmaw that did it.
Yup.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's, like, a lot of Dang, that is a lot of self-reflection.
We did say a lot of words.
Yeah, we did say a lot of words.
I was going to say, let's do a real quick recap on that. Maybe in a sentence or two. Why do you play Magic?
I play Magic for the plot and because I really like seeing how other people's brains work in a game that I love as well, and how their brains work differently from mine.
What do you enjoy about playing Magic?
I enjoy doing kind of stylish, fancy things. I enjoy making very splashy plays, and I enjoy doing the unexpected.
And what are your goals when playing Magic?
Make people terrified of shitty bulk 2008 Alara rares and mythics.
So there you go.
And also maybe gain life in increments of 1 and drain life in increments of 1.
Of course.
Make people punish people for every game action. We'll say that is definitely another one of my goals that is very much tied to my brand that we didn't touch on yet.
So there you go. That's for the listeners. You can answer that in the comments. That's 3 easy questions for you. Character limits may vary. Have fun with that. Okay, well, is there anything else you wanted to launch into topic-wise?
Oh gosh, yes there is.
Okay.
One more thing. And I think this kind of ties it together. Because here's a deck that I think really exemplifies everything that I talked about. And this is my next Magic the Gathering deck. This is the next deck that I am building. This will be the next commander deck that I have in a playable form. And it is Heragast Erupting Nullkite. This deck came about from the idea of... So, why is this plot? This deck came about because I bought, I was looking for Magic the Gathering sleeves and playmats, and I found there was a Pokemon, like, Charizard promotional box or something that came with, like, a sleeves and playmats, and people were, like, buying the box for, like, I think there was a collectible figure, and, like, I think probably... If it's anything like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic, like, there was probably, like, a card that was, like, a chase card in there that people were just buying, taking the chase card, and then, like, selling the rest of it for profit. So I got these sleeves and, like, playmat for, like, $6 altogether. Like, 100 sleeves and a playmat, which is, like, amazing. And it's, like, Gigantamax Charizard. It's really cool. So I was like, okay, I have to build a deck that is themed around Gigantamax Charizard, or just Charizard. So I'm like, Heragast is Charizard. And I really love the flavor of, like, her Emerge, like, these I've wanted to build a Mono Red Dragons deck forever anyway. I love the idea of the Emerge being basically, like, oh yeah, like, you know, in the TV show for kids, when the trainer isn't skilled enough to control Charizard, the Charizard's just gonna take a nap and, like, act like a little brat. But, like, in a more realistic world, that Charizard's fucking eating that kid. You know? Like, that Charizard, like, we're getting a full Joe Exotic situation going on over here. So, I love that idea. That is partially why a lot of the creatures that are not dragons in this deck are goblins, because I feel like goblins would be very inefficient dragon trainers. The other reason is... and this kind of, I think, ties into the idea of, like, innovation or, like, doing things differently, and kind of where I get themes for decks. So Emerge really wants you to have sack fodder that has a mana value associated with it. So a lot of Aristocrats decks, and this is a mono red Aristocrats deck, a lot of Aristocrats decks make tokens because they're the most efficient way to, you know, generate a lot of sack outlets, or sack fodder very quickly. Mm-hmm. So this deck actually does generate a lot of tokens. But the token generators are often things like Goblin Gang Leader, Beetleback Chief, Goblin Marshal, which are, like, you know, like Goblin Gang Leader and Beetleback Chief, 4 mana, Goblin, when it enters, make 2 1/1 goblins, right? So then you can sacrifice that 4 mana creature to emerge something else, but you keep the tokens. So kind of instead of making these things that are token generators and then sacking the tokens, you're sacking the generator and keeping the tokens. And I have some dragons in here with Devour, so the tokens get chomped up. And
yeah, it kind of turns every new creature in your hand into a one-time sack outlet, where the output is more tokens.
And it turns the game into Yu-Gi-Oh! A little bit, where you're like sacking creatures to chain into other creatures, which is kind of cool.
I hadn't even thought about that.
I really feel like I should actually, looking at this list, one card that I really need to put in here that's not in here currently is, I think it's going to probably replace Wily Goblin, is Priest of Urabrask, which is a really good way to, as you would say in Yu-Gi-Oh, like synchro or like link climb, because you play it essentially gives you 6 mana worth of. It essentially is a 6 mana ritual.
In the specific context of Haragast gives.
In the specific context. Right. And that's such a good context, though. Yeah. So that is. In other contexts, it's a free creature. Play like a Filigree Familiar. Cool. You have more merge fodder for later. I don't know. So yeah, this deck is Mono Red Aristocrats Dragon Kindred.
She plays Golgari, Burn, Mono Red Aristocrats. Stay tuned for Azorius Beatdown next.
I have been talking about like Azorius Big Flyer Beatdown.
That's true, you have.
That's Azorius Stompy. Mono White Jund is also coming with Saint Elenda.
Oh, Saint Elenda, your NFT.
We're gonna have to. You know what? I'm gonna save the Alchemy soapbox for another day.
All right, we'll stow the.
We're leaving that one at the door
for next time.
Yeah. Man, I feel bad. I feel like this episode is. I feel like I was very rambly, and this episode is gonna be hell to edit, but.
That's all right. We'll let the editor deal with that. Looks in the mirror. Oh no.
Yeah. Oh no. We'll fix it in post.
I'll fix it in post.
Yeah. Yep. You'll fix it in post.
All right. Well, do you have any closing thoughts that you want to leave before we head out? Any Midwestern knee slap whelp?
Can I do a shout out?
You can do a shout out.
Oh my god, I have to find the shout out.
All right, well, I'm going to steal your shout out.
Do the thing. Do the thing while I find this.
I have another shout out. I also wanted to offer a shout out to, well, we mentioned Empress Quinn already, but also to Steel City Steph, 2 other deck builders who greatly inspire me to continue doing my thing and to continue asking why I do my thing, because they're the kind of Magic players and deck builders that attract me to wanting to play the game. Two people that I had also listed along with Bobby Christine, who I listed earlier. 3 people that just have very strong identities, I think, with their deck building and who inspire me to continue, enjoying the game. I think that's the easiest way to say it.
All right. So my shout out is to Abzan Death and Taxes on Blue Sky. And this goes back to us talking about doing unusual things for color combinations. She replied to my keeper cut that was yesterday, about which mine was Young Pyromancer, and was like, yeah, I usually play Abzan, so I don't have, it's not really known for spell slinging. I'm not really dabbling in Izzet. Maybe I'll do Rakdos tokens. I don't really know this card, right? And I was like, well, you have Monastery Mentor, Sedgemoor Witch, and the Magecraft cards, some of which are black, green, and black, white. Maybe there's an Abzan an Abzan Spellslinger deck. And they were Leon and Light Scribe, Battle Mage, cheap removal, Village Rites type cards. Keep an eye on my deck building posts. I'm to steal from Empress Quinn on my desk, 2 weeks. Abzan Spellslinger. If I see it, I will definitely shout it out on the next episode for sure.
All right, that's Coburn's Divine on Blue Sky. Go give them a follow.
Coburn's Divine, yes.
I also enjoy the conversations with her that I have had.
Heck yeah.
All right, well, Medusa, where can they find you on the internet?
The lovely Medusa. You know what? Just Google. You know what? Don't Google it. The lovely Medusa on Blue Sky mostly these days. I also have an Instagram. You know, if you want to follow me there. Yeah, that's pretty much where you can find me.
I'm Light the Phyrexian on Blue Sky and most other places on the internet that matter, and some of them that don't. Go follow me on Moxfield. Get out of my house.